The air in the Sterling Court penthouse was sterile, reflecting the man who owned it. Elias Sterling, 32, was a machine of profit, his life a symphony of quarterly reports and acquisition strategy. Yet, a creeping void had started to hollow out his success. For his latest, most controversial initiative, a massive urban renewal project meant to transform a struggling neighborhood into a gleaming tech hub, Elias felt he needed authenticity. He decided to live undercover among the very people his project would displace. And so, Elias Sterling, CEO, vanished, replaced by Eli Stone, a self-proclaimed freelance researcher, equipped with nothing but a dingy apartment, a few $100s, and a notebook full of condescending assumptions. His new surroundings were a shock to his system. The cacophony of life, the smell of street food, the peeling paint on every wall. It was a world away from his minimalist towers. He initially treated the neighborhood as a zoo, observing its inhabitants with a clinical, detached curiosity. His plan was simple: gather data, confirm that the residents were too disorganized to resist, and execute the gentrification plan swiftly. It was during one of these detached observations that he saw her. Chloe Harper. Chloe was a hurricane of purposeful movement in a community built on stagnation. Eli first saw her loading crates of vegetables at a local market stall before dawn. He saw her again in the evening, tutoring neighborhood kids in a cramped community hall, her voice patient and her energy boundless. Her entire existence, he noted in his meticulous journal, was dedicated to keeping her younger brother, Leo, a bright 7-year-old with chronic asthma, healthy and in school. She held down 3 jobs: the market, the tutoring, and shifts at a diner, barely clinging to existence. Elias, the corporate strategist, immediately categorized her: a charity case, an ideal subject for his final report, evidence of the neighborhood's desperate need for outside intervention. He rented the small apartment directly across the alley from hers, a stroke of deliberate journalistic luck. Their initial interactions were transactional and cool. She would often see him staring, a wealthy, too-clean man trying to look poor. He'd offer her a crisp $20 bill for a cup of coffee at the diner where she worked, a gesture of charity that always made her jaw clench. "Keep your charity, Mr. Stone," she'd said once, pushing the money back. "I earn what I take." That simple refusal was the first crack in Elias's perfectly constructed cynicism. He had spent his life believing that everyone had a price. Chloe seemed to believe only in value, and her currency was sheer grit. The forced proximity, however, began the slow, painful process of thawing his frozen corporate heart. One rainy afternoon, Eli watched her struggling to fix a leak in her roof, a task far beyond her strength. After a 10-minute internal debate where Elias Sterling argued fiercely against Eli Stone, Eli reluctantly emerged, tools in hand. He fixed the leak efficiently. She didn't thank him effusively. She simply offered him a plate of hot, home-cooked food, the best meal he'd had since leaving his personal chef. "You've got good hands for a researcher," she said, her eyes twinkling with a cautious amusement that startled him. Over the next few weeks, their interactions deepened, moving from necessary neighborly exchanges to shared moments. He stopped interviewing people for his report and started listening to them. He watched Chloe sacrifice her own comfort, her old, worn coat, a missed dinner, just to ensure Leo had his medicine. He realized her strength wasn't born of desperation, but of boundless, fierce love. The turning point came when disaster struck. Leo had a severe asthma attack late one night, a sudden, terrifying event that required immediate, specialized care far beyond what the local clinic could offer. Chloe, frantic and tearful, was desperately trying to scrape together money for a taxi to a distant hospital. In that moment, Eli Stone's facade cracked completely. He didn't think about his report, his project, or his identity. He simply became the man who could help. He used his secret, untraceable corporate card to instantly pay for an ambulance, secure Leo a private room at one of the city's best hospitals, and arrange for the best specialists to attend to him. He stayed with Chloe the entire night, not as a researcher observing a crisis, but as a person holding the hand of another who was terrified. When Leo was stable, Chloe looked at Eli, her eyes wet but clear. "How did you do that, Eli?" she asked, her voice low and filled with suspicion. "The bills, the doctor, that's not freelance researcher money." Eli felt the weight of his deception crash down. He couldn't lie anymore. He sat on a hospital chair, the white, clinical setting mirroring the sterile life he'd tried to escape, and confessed. "My name isn't Eli Stone. It's Elias Sterling. I'm the CEO of Sterling Corporation. I came here to study the neighborhood for the renewal project, and I thought you were just a charity case." The silence that followed was louder than any boardroom argument he'd ever faced. Chloe's face hardened into a mask of complete devastation. "You were spying on us? You were going to use my life, Leo's sickness, all of this for a report? To justify taking our homes?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes, which had always held a warm fire, were now ice. The betrayal was absolute. "Get out," she whispered, pointing toward the door. "Take your money and your fancy title and get out. You didn't come here to help, you came here to conquer. And the one thing you can never conquer, Elias Sterling, is our dignity." Elias left, crushed by the truth of her words. He returned to his opulent apartment, but the victory of Leo's recovery felt hollow. He realized that the man he was, the Elias Sterling who valued profit over people, was entirely empty. The love he felt for Chloe, a feeling so pure it made him physically ache, was dependent on the integrity of Eli Stone, a man who never truly existed. He had to prove that the man he became, because of her, was the man he intended to be forever. He went back to Sterling Corp., but this time he didn't run the company. He re-engineered it. He killed the original, gentrifying project plan. Instead, he proposed a radical new initiative, community empowerment. Using the resources of Sterling Corp., he worked with local leaders, not against them. He invested in job training, created microloan programs for local businesses like Chloe's Diner, and funded the very community center where Chloe had been tutoring. He used his power to uplift, not to erase. It took months. Chloe refused to see him, but she couldn't ignore the changes happening in her neighborhood, changes that were suddenly supportive and sustainable, not predatory. Finally, he cornered her at the reopened community center. He didn't come with promises or excuses, but with a completed blueprint for the center's expansion, named the Leo Harper Foundation Wing, a place that provided free medical checks and tutoring for local kids. "I can't undo how I met you, Chloe," he said, handing her the foundation papers. "I was a tourist in your life, but you taught me my real name. You showed me that my real value isn't in my wealth, but in what I choose to protect. I am still Elias Sterling, but I'll never be that man again. I love you, not as a project, but as the truth I finally found." Chloe looked at the blueprint at the center of the design, a small, dedicated space for a medical assessment room, labeled in honor of her brother. She saw not the CEO who had lied, but the man who had stayed up all night holding her hand, the man who had fixed her roof with calloused hands, the man who had sacrificed his corporate goal for her community. She saw Eli Stone, embodied in the integrity of Elias Sterling. A slow, fragile smile spread across her face. "Welcome home, Eli," she whispered, the first time she had called him that since the night in the hospital. Their love was forged not in a fairy tale, but in the gritty reality of change, built on honesty and shared purpose. Elias Sterling, the powerful CEO, finally understood that the greatest power was not the ability to build skyscrapers, but the ability to protect a single, irreplaceable heart and the community she called home. The true Sterling legacy would be one of service, inspired entirely by the resilience of Chloe Harper.